Okay, thanks everyone for joining us today. Today we have Tara Scott here to talk to us. So Tara, before we get started, do you want to just do a quick introduction of yourself and then feel free to jump in?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Tara Scott. I am sadly not in Philly. I am in Minneapolis, but I was born on the East Coast. So I was born in Boston, and like 98% of my family's on the East Coast. So I love it out there. I've spent about a decade in the tech space. Actually came across a little consulting shop called DevJam a million years ago where David Hussman worked, and I had no idea what agile was or what I was doing. I came from the world of healthcare. I was there for 10 years, and the rest is kind of history. So I work a lot. I'm going to get to this a little bit in my bio, but I kind of have worked in many different domains and spaces, but my focus is primarily on human behavior and technology. So that's a little bit about me. And I also have a link if you want to follow along, because I won't be sharing my slides because some of them are kind of interactive. I've got Google Slides. I just shared a link. It should be accessible to everyone. If you want to follow along, let me know if for some reason you have trouble accessing it, but it looks like I'm already seeing cute little animals that are anonymous, like an anonymous.
It's actually blocked for me, but there's probably nothing you can do about that.
Oh, no. Okay.
By my company. I mean, it's
By
probably
your
blocked.
company.
I'm
Okay.
guessing that's it. Yeah. So,
well, let's do this.
thanks
then.
anyway.
No, that's okay. I can still share and then have people follow along. I want to make sure.
Okay. You don't need to do it just for me, but
It's okay. Can you see my screen?
Looks good.
Excellent. All right, then I will go ahead and get started. So what we'll talk a little bit about this evening. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why this work matters to me, why I want to talk about adapting and experimenting with behavioral agility and not just agility when we're creating products. The value of evolving a behavior, why we want to challenge the way that our minds think and what that can give us. The power of self-reflection. What does it really mean when we actually give ourselves time to self-reflect and think about how we respond? I'm going to talk a little bit about Gottman's Four Horsemen, which is a theory that is actually based in marital counseling, which is super interesting. So I'm going to dig into that a little bit. I'm going to talk about how we build behavioral agility, something I do called team dynamics mapping, hopefully a helpful tool that you can take with you if it's something where you feel like maybe you or your teams are kind of struggling, might be helpful. And then Q&A. So that's it for me. Slide number 3. So I'm Tara. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an organizational coach. I also do product coaching, UX coaching. I'm also a fearless organization practitioner. What does that mean? So Amy Edmondson is the person who kind of pioneered the term psychological safety. And I was very excited to see that she actually held a certification program. Even though I've never been a big certification person, I really wanted data to back up the experiences of employees and executives at companies. So that's why I went ahead and did that. I love running. I love biking. I love music. I talked a little bit about being in Philly for music. Indoor bouldering, animals, plants. I live with my partner. We have 3 dogs, a pug, a chihuahua, and a Wheaten Terrier. And we have, I think, I don't remember, I lost count, like 56 plants or something, some insane number of plants. We have a lot. But I would love to know a little bit about you. So in slide number 4, if you're able to, and if you're not, no worries. Just adding your name, your anything about your role that you'd like to share, and what brings you here today.
Do we have to do something specific to type?
No, and actually I don't know where my
I have to request. It says I have to request. Oh shoot. Oh.
Really? Hang
Yeah,
on.
it says I have to
Yeah, we're
request
just
edit
viewers.
access.
We're all viewers.
You're all viewers. I changed it to editors, but let's try that again. All right, hold the phone, share. My bad. Why does it default to that? I don't know. So try that one more time. Sorry.
You have to reload the web page to
That's
give.
right.
It would be rude to skip after asking that I speak here. Amazing. Amazing and honest. All right. Well, it is lovely to meet all of you. Thank you so much for coming. Does anyone want to share anything about what brings you here? Is there something in particular that you're hoping to learn? And if not, that's cool too.
I could always get better at working with humans.
Same. Yeah. It's not easy. I
Yeah,
agree.
I'm with John on that one.
Awesome. All right. Well, we will jump to slide number 5. And I'm going to blow this back up since I had to get out of it. Let's do this. Boop. There we go. So why this work matters so much to me. As I mentioned, so I started like very beginning of 2013 after being laid off from a medical company, from a database research group that I was very bored at and always kind of wanted to get into technology, but didn't really know how to do it. In the late 90s when I was in college, I thought I'll take some computer science classes, but I ended up being an English major and the rest is kind of history. But I ended up working in technology for, I've been here for about a decade now, a little over a decade, and I've moved through a myriad of positions: project manager, sales, marketing. I've kind of done a little bit of everything. And then product ownership, UX design, UX research. Actually, my first job out of college was as a graphic designer, but not so much on the UX side of things. And then eventually coaching and teaching. And I also kind of fell into engineering management only because they were eliminating coaching positions from an organization. And I swore that I would never be a manager again because I was in mental health in a totally different industry and thought I'd never do that again, but I agreed to do it. And I'm glad I did, because what I really recognized from that experience is just how much focus we put on delivery and how we don't focus on interactions and behavior. Now, I'm not saying that people, I know that people sometimes hold retrospectives, they have conversations about what's happening, but we're not really reflecting and thinking about our own behavior. It's more reflecting and thinking about what did we get done, what didn't we get done, and why. So to me, behavior is just as agile and adaptable as any project or deliverable. I think we do ourselves a great disservice to only focus on the things that we're producing and not how we are approaching them as humans and how we want to show up. This picture is myself and my dad and my 2 pugs. One of whom has passed, the little one who's to the far left, Brain. But I still have Penny, and she's right next to me. And that's me holding my nerdy Abbey Road mug. So my dad is a big inspiration for why I kind of got into this. He worked at IBM for about 25 years. He worked as a sales trainer, a sales manager, more so like hardware sales. And I never witnessed him go a week without looking like he was going to not have a mental breakdown. He was stressed out all the time. He wasn't able to talk to his boss. This is like, back in the day in the 80s where it's like, put up or shut up. You just don't talk about your problems. You don't talk about it with your spouse or your friends. You just kind of suck it up and deal. He ended up having a psychotic break in 2005. And while work was not the only reason that this happened, it was a huge contributor to his stress. And he and I continue to have really good conversations about what he wished he could have done differently. And whenever I ask him, like, what's your number one thing? Because I still check in with him, like, would anything have changed? Because I talk about the work that I do and he loves it. He always says, I wish that I would have asked for help. I wish that I would have said, this is too much, when things felt like they were too much. And so he and I continue to have dialogues about the world that was of work, but the world that is now. And there are occasions where I don't see a huge difference in terms of stress, pressure, and people feeling like they need to solely own everything, where we need to be a community and really show up for one another. So for me, I was indoctrinated into XP stuff early on because of David and some coaches that I worked with. And since, the 5 values of XP are simplicity, feedback, courage, respect, and communication, why don't we ever focus on strengthening how we work together? I think that we talk about it maybe in terms of like organizational design and structure if we're lucky, but we don't really talk about what we're showing up with. So just like agility itself, behavioral agility isn't just about a prescriptive process, it's about a mindset. So why is this important? There are a few reasons for me. It builds confidence and self-respect to be able to have the ability to be self-aware, to be humble, to be kind to ourselves, and also lets us know that when we're showing up as ourselves, it's with our genuine self as the best that we can at that time. It improves communication across teams. If you've ever been at an organization where maybe product and delivery or whatever words they're choosing to use at that time are split. There are people who are developing things. There are people who are focusing on the user. And it's about trying to get everybody collaborating together. Being able to have agility when it comes to your own behavior is only going to help you strengthen those muscles. Like anything else, it's kind of like when a band starts playing together for the first time, they sound super crappy. That's kind of what it feels like to be a new team, right? Or to even work across teams. Maybe it's a group that you don't work with all the time, but for specific projects or products, this is going to help you improve your communication. Also, stronger pair programming and clearer messaging. I don't know about any of you, but the last thing I want is another meeting. So we can clarify what we should have clarified in the meeting before. And there's no need for that. That's not to say that will never happen again. But if we have the power to really recognize what we need to change about our own behavior or ask powerful questions about what we might need to know so we don't have to have another conversation, that's going to be super valuable. So why does this stuff matter? What I'm really talking about here is psychological safety for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, which is really about how we show up together as a team, hopefully in a way where we feel like we can speak up, we can be honest about our feelings, we don't feel like we're going to be judged, we don't feel like we're going to get in trouble. This all started from Project Aristotle in 2015. I'm not going to read this verbatim, but there were 180 teams that were measured in 4 different ways. And the research showed, like you see on the table on the right, while other things were important, like dependability and structure and meaning and impact, without psychological safety, it was impossible to be a truly effective team because people didn't feel like they could show up in a genuine way. So this is some data that I love to share from Harvard Business Review. I am a Harvard Business Review nerd, and I'm always looking for data to kind of show us that it's not just subjective conversations about like why this stuff matters. So compared with people at low trust organizations, people at high trust organizations have a lot less stress. You're more productive. You have fewer sick days. You experience less burnout. And this was from like pre-pandemic. I would love to see new data on these things with high and low trust, but I guarantee you, like people who feel more secure often want to come to work. They don't get the Sunday scaries. They don't feel like, oh my gosh, I can't really be myself at my job. I'm super stressed out. What you're going to see on the right is kind of a simplified version of modern agile, which is I work at Industrial Logic. We practice modern agility. And one of those pie slices is making safety a prerequisite. So it's just a part of who we are at the core of IL. So how do we start doing this stuff? How do we even start looking at it? So agility really begins with our own behavior. It starts with the self. So I teach a workshop called the Actionable Psychological Safety Workshop, which I will have a link to at the end of this. We have a new workshop that's starting actually in a week, and we have just a few spots left. But the reason why I wanted to start that workshop is because I think it's so important for us to really understand where we're coming from before we start projecting onto other people. But as humans, that is usually the thing that we do. So a lot of times when people sign up for my workshop, they'll come in and say like, yeah, my coworkers don't talk. They don't communicate well enough, blah, blah, blah. My first ask is, do you know how you communicate? Do you know how you show up? So this is really about starting with the self at the center. So it's understanding our needs. And what I mean by needs is, how do you need to communicate? What do you expect out of people? Do you understand your own triggers? And what do I mean by this? We all have a history. We've all had other jobs. We all bring that stuff with us subconsciously, whether we know it or not. So if we're coming to an organization, so for example, when I was a project manager a million years ago, I hated it. It was like my least favorite job. And to this day, if someone asks me that something that even sounds like slightly project management-y, I have a very visceral physical reaction. I can feel myself react to it. I'm like, ugh, no, I don't want to have any part of that. So I have to pause and recognize it's not about this person who's asking me. It's actually because of my bad experiences in the past that clearly I have not completely dealt with. This is about taking responsibility for ourselves, the good and the bad stuff. While we all know that we show up to work and we don't say like, I'm just going to be the biggest jerk on earth today, there's always going to be stuff that we're going to be able to improve. And that takes self-reflection. This is also about understanding our biases. So when we come into a team meeting or a conversation, are we coming in with biases about the people in the room? Are we coming in with biases about the product that we're working on? These are all things that we want to think about. And then being curious about the perspectives of others is a huge one. It cannot just be about us. The self-reflection needs to start there, but it's the recognition that it is impact over intention. So while we don't ever go to work, hopefully, saying I'm going to be this biggest jerk on earth, we might not be aware of some of the impact that we're having with the folks that we work with. So I'm going to give you some examples, and I want to know what comes up for you. Just the first things on top of the head. This could be like a physical response. This could be anything like, oh, my hands got clammy. I clenched my teeth. I felt, a tightness in my chest, or just like a verbal response that you might want to have. Let's say you get an unnecessarily harsh response as a code review, or if you don't work with code, a response to something that you've worked on that feels condescending and dismissive. I just want you to write like the first things that come to mind for you. What happens when you get something like this and you're having that exchange? Heart rate, adrenaline spikes, right? You're having like a physical reaction. Your nervous system is going to process this stuff first. Try so hard not to show it in my face. I did a bad job. Defensiveness, anger, defensiveness. Yeah. This is going to take me more time than I want it to. Try to speak with that person face to face. Ooh, reflexively dismiss. Yeah. Absolutely. How about this one? What comes up for you here? You hear from a trusted person that someone said something unkind about you to leadership. What comes up for you now? Said something unkind. It was unjustified. Hurt. How is that possible? Who said it? Yeah, we want to know who said it. Worry, have a hard time trusting. Fear, worry, anxiousness. Who said it and why? We want to know who, right? It's like, this didn't just come from nowhere. Who said this? Why would anyone say this about me? Do they have a vendetta against me? Do they have something that they're trying to prove? Does it impact my relationship with leadership? Of course, you're going to be freaked out about all that stuff. How about this one? There's someone that you work with who is continuously making meetings run over by taking conversations way off topic. So they're not paying attention to the clock. My partner's actually an architect, and she's always, her mind is blown that a lot of my meetings are like respected time-wise because they go like way over. But it happens, especially if you're deep into a project. Well, how does that make you feel when that happens? Disengaged. Yep. Frustrated. And people can blurt out things if they like as well. Bored. Not aligned. Frustrated. Eye rolling for sure.
Tara, since I can't access this, do you want me to put any thoughts in the chat, or
Sure, you can do that.
what would be the best
If
way?
folks,
Okay.
if somebody could share it, that would be great, because I have all my windows open here.
Yeah, I can't access it.
Frustrated, eye rolling, not aligned on our process or our culture. Right. There's something's off, right? It's like something isn't feeling right. So I'm not sure if anyone here has ever heard of the 5 F's before, and we're going to jump to frame 14. But our nervous system is the first thing that responds in situations like this. So when someone says something bad about us and we hear about it, when a meeting runs over, when we feel like somebody said something that was super harsh, we're not going to be able to think clearly. I dig more into this in our workshop, but there's a lot of neuroscience behind it. If folks are familiar with the amygdala hijack, our frontal lobe is what really processes our logic. And when our amygdala, our lizard brain, is kicked into gear, we are not able to think logically. And so we are going to respond in a very visceral way. So the first one of these is fight. So if you go into fight mode, you feel really aggressive. So maybe I for one know that if I know that somebody has said something that was untrue about me, it's like that old Bostonian comes out in the back of my head and I'm like, that is not true. Why did someone say that? And I'm not able to really think clearly. Second one is flight. So like people were saying, somebody, has these meetings that run over super long. So you just tune out. You're just like, not even really interested, not going to really listen to it. The third one is freeze. So often this will happen if it's something that's shocking. There's this incredible book, and I believe I have it listed at my book recommendations at the end, called The Body Keeps the Score, that talks about our trauma responses to things. And there's this incredible story about this couple who's involved in like this, I can't remember, like 12 or 14 car wreck. And it's really horrible, and people died, and the male from this couple gets out of the car and starts helping people, but the wife is absolutely frozen and remains that way emotionally for like weeks on end because she can't process the trauma of what just happened. I, for one, actually had a boss throw a telephone at a wall and it exploded like in a million pieces. And I definitely had a freeze response. I just didn't know how to react. And that's what happens in those situations. Fawn is interesting. So fawn is one that I actually go to a lot. Fawn is wanting to make things better on a surface level, but not actually dealing with the problem. So let's say if I had watched my boss insanely throw a phone at the wall, my response had been like, hey, are you okay? Can we let's get you like some coffee and get out of here. Trying to just make things better and butter them up just to make the problem go away, even though the root cause of the issue is never really solved. And number 5 is flop. So flop often happens. I see this happen a lot when it's something that has happened repeatedly. So maybe that meeting that you've been in that goes long always goes long with this person. You just slump in your chair, you're bored, you're not able to process, you're not able to really think things through. The reason why I'm sharing these things is it's so important for us to give ourselves just a beat to think about what just happened, what is making us feel that way, and what do we want to be our response. If our nervous system is responding in this way, our amygdala hijack is kicking in, we're feeling feisty, we're probably not going to have a great response in this moment. So this is about pausing and breathing and just giving yourself a minute before you get verbally upset or before you check out. Notice if you're in it. So a lot of times when I'm in meetings, I try to practice what I preach, and I'll be like, where are you right now? There's something called the responsibility process that I don't have time to teach here, but that's something that's also part of our workshop. And it's really about recognizing where we are. The goal is not to never be in these, for the record. This is going to happen to us. We are human beings. We have a brain. This is how we respond. However, it's about giving ourselves that moment to respond so that we can have a better way to recognize where we are. So I mentioned the 4 horsemen a little bit. So the Gottman's 4 horsemen, Mr. and Mrs. Gottman are 2 therapists. They're marriage therapists. And they describe, this is a metaphor that's used to describe conquest, war, hunger, and death, respectively. Obviously, we're not really talking about these things, but this is more so recognizing 4 categories that often we fall into when conflict happens. And they have done studies where they can actually predict whether or not a couple will stay together on how they process these things when they fall into these categories. So with criticism, we're verbally attacking personality or character. So let's say we do go into fight mode. We just get frustrated. We start yelling at someone. Maybe it's contempt. So somebody's taking up a lot of our time. We have a meeting that's going long. Now we're frustrated. And you just are like really not appreciating this person, and you're just holding a grudge now. Defensiveness, somebody said something mean about you, you victimize yourself to ward off a perceived attack or reverse the blame. Even reading that sentence, you might think, but I didn't do anything wrong. And that is such a human response. It's important for us to be like, yeah, it is, and that's okay. It's not about avoiding conflict. It's about managing the way we determine the success and failure of a relationship. And then stonewalling, my personal favorite, it's probably the most frustrating one to me, withdrawing to avoid conflict and convey disapproval, distance, or separation. Now, luckily, while they have gone through all of this research, they have suggestions for how we can deal with these things. So if we want to criticize someone, what if we can kind of have a gentle startup? And that might sound like really woo-woo and fluffy, but it goes back to like being a kid. It's like treat others the way that you would want to be treated. If you don't want somebody yelling at you if you've screwed up, it's talking about feelings using I statements and expressing positive needs. Like, you know what would be super helpful? I have a meeting that starts right away at the top of the hour. Is there any way we could finish 5 minutes early? Having a conversation like that. And then we have contempt. Instead of just really feeling resentful of someone, maybe you can get a culture of not appropriation, appreciation. Let's definitely not have a culture of appropriation. Remind yourself of your partner's qualities, and in this case, your teammates' qualities. Find gratitude for positive actions. We all know that when we're on a team, we're not going to all have strengths in the same area. So it's really important to recognize, like, maybe this person is like kind of a hot mess when they try and run a stand-up, but they are absolutely phenomenal at something else. So it's about trying to work with what you have. Defensiveness, victimizing yourself to ward off a perceived attack or reverse the blame. This is about taking responsibility, accepting the perspective of someone else, and offering an apology for any wrongdoing that you might have caused. So a lot of times when we feel defensive about something, it doesn't feel good. You're going to know it right away, right? And it's almost like, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like an embarrassing feeling. You're like, well, why am I having to defend myself? Take a step back, because ego is powerful, and see if there is a way that you can look at this from someone else's perspective. And then stonewalling, which we talked about, like withdrawing from avoiding conflict and conveying disapproval. If you have a tendency to do this, take a break. I actually have a friend who she and her partner go to a therapist who practices this, and her partner has a tendency to do the stonewalling. And now her partner will say, can I just take 10 minutes and just chill out and digest things? Because not everyone can respond right away. Again, this is going back to the self, understanding how you work and how best you can show up both for yourselves and other people, and be agile about that. So where do you start? It really starts with self-reflection. So what behavior inspires you? What shuts you down? What's a bad behavior habit that you'd like to change? I'm guessing that not all of us are perfect human beings, as much as we might love to be. So give yourself a minute to think about these things, because we really don't do this. When we walk into teams, we say, here's our working agreement, but that's before we even know each other. We might just be setting arbitrary rules. So let's think a little bit about something that you might want to reflect on. So what inspires you? Just give yourself a minute on slide 17. What inspires you? What's something that makes you feel filled up about work? What feels good? Being listened to, achieving goals. Laughter. Oh my gosh. Yes. I absolutely love going onto a team where I actually see people laugh. I feel like I need to see it more. Solving a problem for and with someone. Laughter and connection, achieving goals, aligning with a mission, and being listened to. Yeah. So just give yourself a minute to think about that. Even if you didn't write something down, like what inspires you? Do you know what makes you filled up? Learning something new, for sure. Being acknowledged for work or time put in. Yeah. All right, we're going to move on to the next one. Frame 18, what behavior shuts you down? And instead of just having my voice drone on and on, I will invite you to reflect on these post-its and share out loud if you'd like to. What's a behavior that shuts you down when you're engaging with someone?
Not listening.
Not listening, not being heard. Maybe interrupting other folks. What shuts you down? Yeah, go ahead. Oh, Pam wrote something.
First thing that came to mind for me was just endless planning and trying to figure out all the details,
Yes,
trying something.
sure. Endless planning. Yep. Tolerating rude behavior. Condescension. Someone doesn't like that. Weird. Yeah. It's horrible.
I think also like dismissiveness
Dismissiveness.
that you have
Absolutely.
down there. Someone
Yeah.
else had that too, but
Yeah. Dismissiveness. When you feel dismissed, why would you show up again? That's
well,
something that,
not like your opinion's not worth it or something.
right, exactly. Well, yeah, it feels like there's no weight to what you're saying. Yeah.
And it especially shuts me down when it's delivered by, this is the way we've always done it.
Mm,
And it's like, well, why bother any of us even coming to work then?
right. Like,
Yeah.
well, cool. Why am I
Or when
here?
you're in a meeting and it's clear that there's two classes of people, the people that are like really there to have the meeting, and the people that are just spectators, and you're only one of the only allowed to be one of the spectators.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like you're on the sidelines. Absolutely. So this one might be a little more challenging. Frame 19, what's a behavioral habit you'd like to change? Is there something that you know that you do? Maybe you've gotten feedback on this before. Maybe it's already something you know about. You can catch yourself doing it, which, by the way, kudos if you have, because not everyone has that self-awareness. Bird. Sorry, my dog's digging in something. What she's doing.
I think the interrupting part is really interesting in the remote world
Yeah.
because it's a lot of times I notice in meetings and stuff, it's very unintentional, meaning somebody will start to talk just because, you know, you're not there looking at each other necessarily. Even if you're on the video, you've got the time delays a little bit and the audio delays. And I think that's hard because a lot of people don't intend to do it, but I think it's a
Right.
little more challenging in remote.
For sure. Yeah, that's, I mean, how many of us start talking then, we're all talking at the same time. Or I've been in those situations, to your point, where people just kind of stop caring and they'll just keep running and just go. It's something that, go ahead.
Sometimes it feels like there's no option but to interrupt somebody because they're just never going to stop talking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's true.
it's true. So I'd love to give folks a minute to just take a look at what you wrote and think about when you might catch yourself doing it. And is there a way where you can look for signs? So someone put fawning / justifying with an authority figure. It's a very easy thing to do. What is it that you could start experimenting with to change that? So I'm going to dig into how we can do that in these next couple slides. So how do we start improving what we do? We talked a little bit about, you know, here's what comes up for us. Now we know that we're not perfect humans. We want to maybe adjust the way that we show up and be a little more agile with our behavior. So number one is know your needs, spending some time getting to know how you work and what you need, because no one else can know that but you. I think it was probably like 2015. I had gotten in the really bad habit of making myself available all the time. It was like via phone, via email. I checked my email the last thing I did before I went to bed, the first thing I did when I got up in the morning. I knew that my need was to not do that, but then I had set this precedent and I was like, oh crap. Nobody else was going to be like, hey, would you like me to not call you at 7 in the morning? You would think, but if it's people from a different time zone, they might not be thinking about it. So take some time to really know what you need. And number two is start small. So I had you identify one behavioral habit you'd like to change, and maybe something you'd like to be more agile with. Experiment in small ways. Let's say there's a leader that you work with who can be super condescending, and your response to that, I don't know if anyone's a 30 Rock fan. I've been watching a lot of 30 Rock lately. But Jack Donaghy's assistant is just like super funny, like all the time, just like, what can I do for you? Can I be your best friend? An extreme experience. But when you're met with a behavior where you feel like you just want to make it better and go away, what's an alternative that you could do to that? Is there a way that you could maybe take a step back and either not say anything or think about what is it that you need in that moment? Because it's not just about that other person in the room. It has to be about you too. And what's something that you can try this week? Is there a way that you can start to play with that behavior? Maybe there's a way that you can do some, just like, if anyone's ever heard of alternative nostril breathing, sounds really weird, but it's a really great way to self-soothe. If you're on camera, it might make it a little weird. But even if you can't do that, like taking deep breaths to reflect on what's happening in that moment. I think we all feel like we're in such a rush all the time, especially in technology. We don't give ourselves a minute to think about how do we want to respond to this? And we feel like we have to respond right away. So start small. Number 3 is communicate. Regardless of whether you're an introvert or extrovert, discover how you can communicate your needs and who needs to hear that. So if you are someone who prefers to chat on Slack, if you're someone who prefers to chat via Zoom, let folks know that, because nobody's going to be able to read your mind. Is it your boss? Is it your team? How do you want to communicate? Just make sure that you do, because silence is deafening. And if people don't know where you're coming from, they're really not going to know what you need. And number 4 is learning your work-life balance. So this kind of goes back to the first one that I talked about, knowing your needs. A lot of times we are working across different, at least for those of us who are remote, we're working across different time zones, different groups of people. If you are okay owning some late nights, then that's okay. It's up to you to set those boundaries, because it's really about boundaries and awareness. Can you log off earlier another day if you do that, so that you're not on every day for 11 hours? Discover what works for you and what will burn you out. Your leaders will respect what you respect. So if you set a boundary for yourself, which is really being agile with behavior, because you're taking that into your own hands and recognizing what you need to change. And the more you practice, just like a band, as an individual and then a team, you're going to be able to do it faster each time. Talk about it. Whether it's sending an email, whether it's sending a Slack message, let people know. Slide 24. So this, this is interesting. So this is in one of the workshops that I teach. This quote is often given to Viktor Frankl. He is actually not the first one who used it. Stephen Covey, who is an author, did, but it speaks so heavily to the work that I often do. I always love to use it. Between stimulus and response lies a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose a response. In our response lies our growth and our happiness. We can never control the way someone else is going to behave or respond. The only thing that we can do is control the way that we respond. So we'll go to frame 25. So maybe make some boundaries visible, some things that you want to show up as. So team dynamics mapping is something that I do with teams. It's a really simple way to first reflect as yourself. So I recommend starting this just you. You can do this in Mural or Miro or whatever product you want to use. But think about, what are you inspired by? How do you best communicate? What do you want to get better at? What shuts you down? You can put in all sorts of different things in these categories. You can mix and match. And then as a team, this is a great way to create a fluid and active working agreement. And if leaders see it, they're going to know what you value. They're going to know what your goals are. They're going to know what you don't tolerate, and they're going to know how you work best. Maybe one way that you work best is not being interrupted during a planning session. Like, that is sacred time for us. We don't want to be interrupted by like having a leader show up. That's time for us as a group to really come together and figure out how we want to work. But I've seen this be a super powerful tool, especially with teams who are very quiet or don't know each other super well, to start with the self-reflection one, because that's really where it all begins, as I talked about in the beginning. And then as you start to really recognize and experiment in small slices, hello, agile and all the things, that's how we really start to evolve, not just as human beings, but as teams. Because if we're all showing up in this way where it's like, I know I'm not perfect. The goal of this is to not be a beautiful, perfect human being. You can be beautiful, but none of us are perfect, and we never will be. And that's really not the goal. The beauty of human beings is being flawed and being able to grow and evolve. And so I've found this to be a really helpful tool to do that. Frame 26. So these are just some links that I wanted to share. Some suggested reading: The Fearless Organization by Amy Edmondson. Hugely impactful book, not just for technology, but for anyone, really talking about how she got to psychological safety as a thing, because when she actually began her research, it was all about errors in hospitals and how she got to psychological safety is kind of fascinating. So I love that book. Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Glover Tawwab. I am not ashamed to say that I actually started reading this when I was going through a divorce. It is an immensely powerful book that can go way beyond personal stuff. It is for anyone and everyone who you interact with in life, because it's really about building confidence and really getting to know yourself. And if you ever experience imposter syndrome, I think all of us do at times, it's a really great way to harness that. And then The Responsibility Process by Christopher Avery. I mentioned that earlier. I don't have time to get into it today, but it's a fabulous book. I can't recommend it enough. It's been a game changer for me. A few podcasts and talks that I've done, Coaching as a Leader, Building Psychological Safety on Teams is a podcast that I did, and then Product Talk with Melissa Perry is one that I did as well. And then this last slide is staying in touch. So you can join our IL Slack community here. I have a little link to our Slack. I mentioned the Psychological Safety Workshop. We have exactly 3 seats left, and it begins May 1st. If you're interested in going, we're giving you a 20% off for attending this chat. Just use the promo code PhillyXP. You will get a 20% discount. We would love to see you there. I am so proud of this workshop. We've been doing it for a few years now. We continue to evolve it. This code will only be good for 24 hours because we do only have 3 seats left. So I encourage you to sign up as soon as you can. We would love to see you. The next session starts next week. And then psychological safety road mapping is also something we do at IL. If you want to learn about how to measure the psychological safety of your team, how to do some of these practices like team dynamics mapping more in depth, you can read more about it there. That is it for me. Questions? I'll open it up for questions. I feel like I talked a lot, and hopefully I didn't go too fast.
I thought it was really good. Very, thought-provoking and self-awareness and things like that.
Thank you.
I guess I'm struggling with the formatting and the wording of the question.
Okay.
I think sometimes interacting with, let's say, a difficult coworker or person, sometimes it's real easy to say, I've changed to this amount, and now like they have to change, or they have to do something. Like I know that like the general guideline is to focus on yourself, but like what's like the threshold where you can maybe stop? Like saying like I need to like it's I've done enough. Maybe I should just like eject out of this relationship, or try to find another way.
Yeah, the advice I would have for that, I guess there are 2 things. So one is going back to the starting small. So if there's even a way where you can just kind of take a pause and think about, like, is it that, and the responsibility process actually digs into this a lot. Is this something, am I wanting this person to show up in a certain way that they just simply aren't capable of doing? And if that's the case, there's this triangle method, this diagram that I just learned about that's super fascinating, and now I wish I had it in front of me. But it's affinity, communication, and I'm going to, of course, forget the last one. But it's affinity, communication, and empathy, I believe. So when we're dealing with someone who isn't showing up in a way for us, these 3 things affect each other threefold. So if somebody isn't communicating really well, you're not really going to like them anymore, and you're not going to feel bad for them. But if somebody is communicating really well, or you really like someone, it makes the other 2 go up. So a lot of times it's good to recognize, like, it often falls to reality first in this little triangle of relationships. If we're not being realistic about how this person shows up, and I actually just recognized this about a relationship with a friend of mine, it's going to impact everything else. So then the conversation has to be about kind of exactly what you said, Anthony. When do I kind of throw in the towel, and when do I kind of decide I can't do this anymore. Obviously that's different if it's work and you have to interact with someone.
Yeah, sure.
Then it's like, what sort of boundaries can I put up for myself so that I can avoid putting myself in these situations where it makes me feel really stuck? One other thing that I do want to share, and I'll just put it in the chat because I didn't have it in the slide deck, is something called situation behavior impact. If you've ever heard of it, SBI. It's if you've gotten to a point where, and hopefully it's not like long gone, but you can have a conversation with this person about why you're having struggles. This is a really good way to take the frustration out of it and talk about facts. So this is the situation. When I was in this meeting with you, behavior, I witnessed you, acting in this way and saying these things. And the impact was, the team no longer trusts you or whatever that might be. But it's a really nice way to just kind of say, this is my experience. And I would like to know what your experience is, just as to start things off.
Thanks. That's great.
Yeah, sure.
I think that last part of what you just said, like and I would like to know what your experience is. Frankly, that's the part that I always miss when I'm trying to do like an SBI. I put out, I try to be generous, about the situation, and, this was just how I felt. But a lot of the times that's not like the thing that the other person hears is, yeah, what do you want me to do about your experience?
Right.
Rather than it's an opportunity for them to share theirs.
Right. And sometimes so it's been the same thing for me in the past, John, especially with certain personalities. I'll start with that and say, so what did you think about the way that went down? I just want to know what your experience was. And then you can kind of pull at some threads and say, this was my experience. But it is exactly what you've said. Like, it's not that the other person, it needs to do nothing more than have awareness and respect what your experience was, because that is valid.
Right.
And if you want to have a productive relationship with someone, whether that be personal life or at work, it's something that we have to talk about. But we as humans are very clumsy at talking about these things, myself included. Like, I teach this stuff and I fumble with it all the time. My partner's daughter is 18. She's actually on her way over here. And I screw it up all the time. I'm like, okay, how do I navigate the situation? I don't think I did that right. Like, it's hard. It's hard to be a human. And yes, I will absolutely share that deck here. I just shared a link. And again, the discount code for the 3 remaining seats for the class that starts next week. The code will be available for use for the next 24 hours. So please go ahead and sign up, because going fast, and it's a really fantastic way to experiment with your day-to-day work life, with your personal life in small digestible bits, so you can actually see progress as you go.
I have another question. Those of us who work at Industrial Logic together, there's a few of us here, but there's sort of a working definition of agility in the air, and that's handy to have that, available. But I feel like we all have our own variations on it. What's your working definition of agility, and how does this tie directly into that? How does being better at the humaning stuff?
Great question. So for me, agility is much more about, it's not so much about doing stuff super quick, which is very close to IL's version. It's not about being quick about it, but it is being able to learn from your experiences to adapt in a more graceful way. So being able to, for me, the grace comes with the peace, the breathing, like taking a moment to be like, okay, if I really think about this, maybe I can start practicing doing this faster and learning from my experiences. And then as you start to do it, like if you have an experience with, like, if we talk about, it's hard for me to talk about this without stereotypes and biases like playing in my head, but like if we think about archetypes, like I'm working with an executive. This executive got his hand slapped by HR for being mean to someone. Now he just pouts and like doesn't really want to talk to me. Have I dealt with other ones like this? Yes, I have. What was my approach then? So it's being able to take that moment to think about how can I relate to it? Have I done something adjacent and pivot and be able to do something else? So it kind of goes back to that whole cycle of, it's probably refining the way that I work with someone, or if that's not working at all, then pivoting completely and trying something else. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, so like agility as a way to make the human interactions better.
Mm-hmm.
And that, would you say that's more than making human interactions better to be more agile?
Is it more than that?
Yeah, is it more one way or the other?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think it's both, because I think that the more that it's just like anything else. It's like the more that we practice it, the more smooth something is going to become, but we're always going to be presented with things that we don't know, things that we haven't experienced yet. And like just today, I was on a conversation with some clients and I was like, how am I going to handle this? I've been doing this for a while. And so I'm like, let me think about it. Let me try and experiment with this thing. Do I refine or do I pivot? So for me, it's kind of both. And at the end of the day, that's going to teach me a ton about being a better human. And also, like, did I approach that in the best way? Is there something that I should have done differently? And hopefully I will be able to foster enough trust with this client that they'll tell me yes or no.
Right on, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
No, guess that's it.
That's all I got.
Thank you very much for this. A lot of great stuff here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, y'all.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
I really
Thank you.
appreciate you coming and speaking today. All right, everybody. Well, hopefully we'll see you all again at a future PhillyXP meeting. Hopefully we'll an in-person one at some point soon for those of you who are in the Philly area.
Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Yeah.
take care, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
right.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.